In the shadowed corridors of London's power structures, where the hum of political ambition often drowns out the cries of the vulnerable, a single voice has pierced the veil of silence. That voice belongs to John Wedger, a battle-hardened detective whose 25 years on the front lines of the Metropolitan Police have etched lines of weary resolve into his face. Once a decorated officer, honored for his unyielding pursuit of justice in the city's most heinous crimes, from brutal murders to labyrinthine fraud schemes, Wedger stepped into the unforgiving spotlight in 2022. His testimony before the independent inquiry into child sexual abuse was no mere recounting of isolated incidents. It was a seismic indictment, a sworn affidavit that rippled through the echelons of London's political elite, law enforcement brass, and even the hallowed halls of Westminster. What he unveiled was not the fevered delusion of a conspiracy theorist, nor the idle whisper of a disgruntled insider. No, this was the meticulously documented chronicle of a man who had stared into the abyss of institutional rot and emerged determined to drag its secrets into the light. Wedger's revelations center on a harrowing tally: 52 children, each one a fragile thread in the fabric of a society that prides itself on compassion and order. These were not abstract figures on a spreadsheet, but real lives. Boys and girls as young as 9, plucked from the precarious edges of existence. He claims to have identified them through tireless field work, piecing together fragments of evidence from whispered confessions, crumpled notes, and the haunted eyes of survivors. Yet when he sought to shield them from the predators circling like vultures, the very pillars of protection he served crumbled beneath him. Institutions that should have rallied, social services, council overseers, fellow officers, allegedly erected barriers of bureaucracy and intimidation. Instead of commendations and resources, Wedger recounts a chilling cascade of reprisals, veiled threats to his career, whispers of foreclosure on his family home, and the gut-wrenching specter of losing custody of his own children. These were not hyperbolic flourishes, but, he insists, calculated maneuvers to muzzle a whistleblower, transforming a guardian of the law into a pariah in his own ranks. The depravity Wedger describes unfolds like a grim tableau from a dystopian novel, yet it is rooted in the stark realities of London's underbelly. Picture, if you can, the vulnerability of these children. Many already adrift in the foster care system, their worlds fractured by neglect, abuse, or the inexorable grind of poverty. In boroughs like Tower Hamlets, with its dense mosaic of immigrant communities and towering council estates, or Camden's bohemian sprawl hiding pockets of despair, these young souls were allegedly ensnared. Groomers, often masquerading as sympathetic figures, lured them with fleeting promises of affection or escape, only to bind them in chains of dependency. Drugs became the currency of control, a hit of crack cocaine or heroin dangled as both reward and restraint, eroding their will until resistance was a distant memory. From there, the machinery of exploitation whirred to life. These children were shuttled to derelict safe houses on the fringes of the city, dingy basements reeking of damp and despair, where they were bartered like chattel for meager drug stashes valued at $50 to $100. But this was merely the entry point, the crude apprenticeship in a far more insidious economy. As Wedger's testimony peels back the layers, the horror escalates into a narrative of calculated ascent. These same victims, numbed and compliant, were then ferried across the Thames to the glittering heart of central London, hotels with marble lobbies and crystal chandeliers, restaurants where power lunches seal multi-million-pound deals. Mayfair, that enclave of opulence where Bentleys purr along narrow lanes lined with bespoke tailors and private banks, emerges as a particularly venomous node in this web. Here, amid the clink of fine china and the murmur of discreet negotiations, Wedger alleges the children were auctioned to a clientele willing to pay up to $2,000 per encounter. The disparity in pricing is not incidental. It underscores the commodification at play, a tiered marketplace where human lives are graded by scarcity and status. What begins as street-level desperation morphs into a high-society transaction, with taxis or unmarked vans serving as the unassuming chariots of this underworld odyssey. The detective paints vivid scenes. A 9-year-old, eyes glazed from substances forced upon them, deposited at a revolving door under the watchful gaze of complicit concierges. A teenager, trembling in a borrowed dress, led through back entrances to suites overlooking Hyde Park, their innocence traded for the fleeting thrill of the privileged. This network, Wedger asserts, was no haphazard syndicate of lone wolves, but a sprawling, interconnected apparatus spanning multiple boroughs. Tower Hamlets, with its labyrinthine markets and overlooked alleys, allegedly served as a recruitment hub, drawing from care homes where oversight was stretched thin. Camden's vibrant yet volatile streets funneled victims northward, linking to Haringey's fractured social fabric, scarred by past scandals like the Baby P tragedy that exposed systemic lapses in child protection. Westminster, the epicenter of political intrigue, provided the upscale venues, its hotels and clubs a stone's throw from Parliament, where laws are debated but rarely enforced against the powerful. Each borough contributed its quota to the chain: sourcing, grooming, transport, and disposal. Reports were shuffled between departments, only to vanish into bureaucratic black holes. Social workers, overburdened and under-resourced, might have glimpsed the signs: bruises dismissed as playground mishaps, absences chalked up to truancy, but the dots were never connected. The result? A conveyor belt of exploitation, where children were not merely victimized but engineered into a profit stream, their trauma monetized with ruthless efficiency. The temporal breadth of this alleged operation is what truly chills the spine. Wedger does not speak of a fleeting epidemic or a rogue operation confined to a single scandalous summer. No, he charts a 2-decade odyssey of unchecked predation, unfurling across the mayoral tenures of 3 disparate leaders, each embodying the city's shifting political winds. Ken Livingston, the fiery left-wing maverick who took the helm in 2000, presided over the early 2000s, an era of post-millennium optimism shadowed by the 7/7 bombings and rising social tensions. Under his watch, initiatives like the London Assembly's scrutiny panels promised accountability, yet Wedger claims the networks burrowed deeper, exploiting the chaos of regeneration projects that displaced vulnerable families into even more precarious housing. Then came Boris Johnson, the tousled conservative showman whose 2008-2016 reign was a whirlwind of Olympic glory and cycle superhighways, but beneath the pomp lurked festering inequalities. Johnson's broken windows policing rhetoric targeted petty crime, but Wedger alleges it blinded authorities to the organized predation thriving in plain sight, with youth services slashed amid austerity measures that left care homes as skeletal outposts of neglect. Finally, Sadiq Khan, the labor stalwart elected in 2016 on a platform of inclusivity and anti-austerity fervor, inherited a metropolis still reeling. Khan's knife crime prevention orders and victim support hubs were lauded, yet according to Wedger, the rot persisted, with reports allegedly funneled to his office only to be met with stony silence. Layered atop this mayoral carousel were the revolving doors of the Metropolitan Police. Commissioners like Sir Ian Blair, who navigated the fallout of Jean-Charles de Menezes' tragic shooting, and Cressida Dick, whose tenure ended amid the Sarah Everard scandal, oversaw forces grappling with internal reforms. Councils cycled through leadership: Tower Hamlet's turbulent administrations under Lutfur Rahman, Camden's progressive yet cash-strapped regimes, Haringey's post-Baby P overhauls that promised but perhaps failed to deliver. Social services directors came and went, each touting fresh strategies, integrated safeguarding boards, multi-agency hubs, yet Wedger's narrative suggests these were facades, brittle shields against a storm of complicity. 20 years. That's 7,300 days of potential intervention squandered, spanning economic booms and busts, terror threats and pandemics. The persistence defies coincidence. Was it a symphony of incompetence, where siloed departments fumbled handoffs like a relay team in disarray? Or something more sinister, a deliberate veil drawn over eyes that chose not to see? Both scenarios erode the foundations of trust. The former indicts negligence, the latter corruption. In a city that styles itself as a beacon of liberal democracy, such longevity implies not just failure, but forfeiture. Delving deeper into the mechanics Wedger outlines, one encounters a blueprint eerily akin to a corporate enterprise, complete with supply chains, risk assessments, and profit margins. The sourcing phase preyed on the system's own orphans, children in local authority care, numbering over 10,000 in London alone during peak years, isolated by design from familial anchors. Care homes, often understaffed and underfunded, became fertile hunting grounds. Staff turnover as high as 30% annually meant fleeting oversight, allowing groomers to pose as mentors or volunteers. Once hooked, the dependency spiral accelerated. Initial gifts of alcohol or cannabis graduated to harder narcotics, forging addictions that bound tighter than any lock. Street-level exchanges in parks like Finsbury Park or the derelict lots of Dalston operated on a barter economy. A child's body for a $50 rock of crack, a transaction as routine as a corner shop sale. But the true ingenuity lay in the upscale pivot. Transport networks, from black cabs with drivers in the know to private hires evading licensing scrutiny, whisked victims citywide. Venues were vetted for discretion. Hotels like the Dorchester or smaller boutique spots in Soho, where night managers allegedly turned blind eyes for kickbacks. Coordination across boroughs relied on encrypted burners and coded signals, a digital undercurrent mirroring the cash flows laundered through betting shops or fake charities. This pipeline, as Wedger terms it, was no siloed vice, but a tributary feeding into London's broader criminal aquifers. The drug linkage was pivotal. Groomers often doubled as dealers, their products sourced from entrenched cartels in South London or imported via Essex ports. Money from high-end sales, potentially $100,000 monthly from a single ring, funneled into laundering schemes, propping up everything from nail bars to property flips in gentrifying zones like Shoreditch. The resilience stemmed from this symbiosis. Dismantle one thread, and the others tightened. Standalone pedophile rings crumble under spotlight, as seen in Rotherham's exposures. But when woven into narcotics and vice empires, they inherit layers of insulation, intimidated witnesses, corrupted insiders, jurisdictional feuds. Wedger's notebooks, yellowed pages filled with timestamps and license plates, capture this interconnectivity. A Haringey care home worker named in a 2005 report, a Westminster hotelier flagged in 2012, a Camden dealer busted in 2018 but never questioned about trafficking ties. Perhaps the most visceral sting in Wedger's account lies not in the mechanics but in the clientele, shattering illusions of elite exclusivity. Yes, the Mayfair suites hosted whispers of shadowy oligarchs or embassy hangers-on, their involvement a geopolitical landmine that could unravel trade deals or diplomatic niceties. But Wedger insists the demand democratize downward, ensnaring ordinary folk in its web. Construction workers, toiling dawn to dusk on Crossrail tunnels or Thames-side skyscrapers, allegedly sought solace in these illicit nights, men earning $200 daily, splurging $500 for an hour's escape. Taxi drivers, navigating the city's veins, might moonlight as procurers. Shopkeepers, blending into the daily grind, harbored darker appetites. This normalization is insidious. It transforms exploitation from a fringe pathology into a societal seepage, where economic pressures, stagnant wages, fraying social fabrics, nurture a market for the forbidden. Psychologists term this demand-side facilitation, where cultural numbing via porn or tabloid sensationalism erodes taboos, priming everyday individuals for escalation. If true, Wedger's insight indicts not just criminals, but a complicit culture, one where vulnerability is not protected, but priced. The fulcrum of Wedger's saga, however, pivots on retaliation, the moment valor met venom. Armed with contemporaneous logs, forensic sketches of suspect vehicles, and victim statements redacted for safety, he escalated through channels, divisional briefings, the IOPC, Independent Office for Police Conduct, even parliamentary select committees. His 2022 inquiry appearance, under oath before a panel of luminaries including Alexis J., architect of the Rotherham Report, was a masterclass in evidentiary rigor. Perjury loomed as a sword of Damocles. Fabricating here meant professional ruin. Yet support evaporated like morning fog. Superiors, he claims, invoked operational sensitivities, code for reputation laundering. Threats materialized in anonymous calls. Drop it, or watch your mortgage default notices pile up. Family photos appeared in unsolicited mail, a mafia-esque nudge toward silence. For a man who'd braved armed sieges and gangland interrogations, this institutional betrayal cut deepest, exposing how loyalty flows one way in the thin blue line, from officer to overlords but rarely back. Politically, the fallout simmers like a pot on boil. Sadiq Khan, the silver-tongued son of a bus driver whose 2024 re-election touted a fairer London, has fielded 9 pointed queries in 2025 alone, from GLA question times to BBC grillings. Each deflection, politically motivated smears, he counters, sidesteps the ledger. Notebooks time-stamped to his mayoralty, victims' ages aligning with his tenure's youth policies. Sworn oaths aren't spin, they're shackles of truth. The Met's confession compounds the culpability. No centralized grooming database. Avoid echoing the post-Soham inquiry's pleas for integrated intel. Haringey Council's amnesia, unaware of historic scale, clashes with Wedger's logs of 2010 briefings to their leads, a disconnect screaming either amnesia or artifice. Westminster's opulence amplifies the stakes. If foreign dignitaries partook, London's cool Britannia sheen tarnishes, deterring the FDI that props up 15% of the economy. At the epicenter orbit, the 52 souls, now in their 20s and 30s, ghosts haunting therapy sessions and courtrooms. Their scars, PTSD rates soaring 70% in trafficking survivors, per NSPCC data, compound with institutional gaslighting. Why didn't you speak up, they hear, oblivious to the gag orders of fear. Some rebuilt, channeling pain into advocacy, like the voices in the IICSA's survivor panels. Others succumb to addiction's echo or the street's final embrace. The dual trauma, violation plus validation's denial, forges a rage that fuels movements, from Dollars End CSE to parliamentary petitions amassing 200,000 signatures. Wedger's fortitude, those preserved files a bulwark against erasure, bolsters his mantle. In an era of deepfakes and denials, paper trails endure, echoing whistleblowers from deep cut to post office horizon. The threats he endured spotlight a pecking order. Institutions as fortresses, whistleblowers as expendables. For Khan, the irony bites. His vulnerability crusade crumbles if shadows linger. The Met, post-Everard, courts collapse if silencing persists. Nationally, it's a siren. If the capital falters, what of Manchester's gangs or Glasgow's hidden harms? Parliament stirs. Bipartisan calls for a grooming network's inquiry, mirroring Australia's Royal Commission, loom. Hearings will summon ghosts. Mayors defending legacies, cops parsing protocols, councils auditing archives. Survivors, long sidelined, seize the mic, their truths a reckoning. This chronicle transcends Wedger, Khan, or the Met. It's a mirror to systemic sclerosis, 2 decades of averted gazes born of sloth or strategy. Its children bartered while empires dined, betrayals etched in ledgers of loss. It's the collective onus to amplify, interrogate, legislate. Share it in pubs and parliaments, tweet it to trending thunder, petition for probes that pierce, demand data dashboards tracking trafficking tides, mandatory multi-agency war rooms, whistleblower shields with teeth. Envision a London where care homes are citadels, not quarries, boroughs, bridges, not blind alleys. The power ultimately resides not in silent suits but in stirred souls. If a detective's daring sparks this blaze, who quenches it? Not the vulnerable, they've burned long enough. The torch passes to us. Ignite accountability, lest the shadows swallow more. For in exposing this, we reclaim not just justice, but the city's soul, vibrant, vigilant, unbowed.